Joining me now, I'm very excited to have Sam Flynn. Sam's here to help us unpack the mysterious world of legal chatbots and how these technologies can be harnessed to drive greater access to justice. Sam, thank you so much for being here.
So Josef is what's called a legal automation platform. So we license the platform to law firms and legal organizations, including community legal centers, to allow them to build what are called legal bots or chatbots. Those bots, a bot for people who don't know, is a piece of software that automates a task. So a legal bot, quite simply, is a piece of software that automates a legal task. So drafting documents, lawyer-client interactions, so like a lawyer-client interview, for example, and automating the provision of legal guidance and advice. So my origin story in relation to Josef was building a consumer-facing legal app called Mikey Fines in 2016, which helped people in Melbourne understand their rights in relation to public transport ticketing system, which at the time faced a lot of problems. That was hugely successful. So we had 60,000 users in the first month with a $0 marketing spend. So now Josef being a year and a half old, I think, from launch, we work across the legal industry. So we work with Clifford Chance and Herbert Smith Freehills, all the way through to sole practitioners. But when we first started, this was a project solely for community legal centers. So it was a passion project that we did on the weekends, and we were building one bot for one community legal center.
Yeah.
And as we were building that bot, we realized, okay, if we enabled firms or empowered them to build and launch their own bots, then we can magnify the impact of what we're doing. And so that's where the real idea was born.
Very interesting, because there are certain concerns within the community justice sector that the use of these types of technologies, artificial intelligence, removes the human aspect to the core of what they do in terms of providing human-centered services. Mm-hmm. How would you respond to those concerns?
Yeah, super valid concerns. I suppose I would respond in three ways. So the first is to acknowledge that as a really valid concern and something that we definitely don't want to lose. The second would be this kind of technology, so automated services, is not and never should be seen as a means of replacing face-to-face manual services. Yeah. It is a way of supplementing those services and enabling us to do our jobs better. So what we've observed at Josef is by automating some of the lower level tasks and the tasks that lawyers and legal professionals don't necessarily want to do, weren't originally trained to do, data entry, intake, drafting repetitive documents, you actually give them the space to focus on the things that matter to them and the things that matter to their clients. So I would encourage people to think about it in that way rather than as a replacement, because it's not at the moment, and it's not looking likely to be, at least for a very, very, very long time. My answer, though, is going to be a little bit ambiguous, because the answer can't be this particular area of law is not amenable to this particular type of technology. Rather, you have to look at the specific process that you're talking about. Yeah. So if someone was, say, automating a divorce from start to finish and removing any human interaction from a lawyer or a legal professional with the client, I'm going to be concerned about that proposition. But if a legal professional or a lawyer or the client identifies parts of that process that would be amenable to automation or a chatbot or a bot or some other type of technology, then that's less of a concern. And I think whenever we decide on a process or a legal task that is to be automated, we have to go through a process of analysis to say, is this appropriate for that technology? And we should do that anywhere, but particularly in sensitive areas like family law. And so the questions we should ask ourselves are exactly the ones you just raised. So are there going to be heightened tensions, heightened emotions, in which case it might not be appropriate? But also, what is the risk? What is the value of that particular process? There's a series of questions that we ask ourselves at Josef, and we ask of our customers at Josef, so the law firms and the legal organisations, to say, is this appropriate? Fascinating question. I always hesitate to make predictions about the future of technology because they're notoriously difficult to make. I think in terms of where we're at now, if we just bring it back to, I suppose, what we know and what we've already seen implemented, the way that we incorporate emotional intelligence into automated bots or chatbots at the moment, the way that I've seen it done most impressively, is not through building in emotional intelligence, for example, through machine learning, but rather through user testing and design thinking, so that when we build out the bot, we test it with real humans, we as humans test it with other humans, record the results, and then feed that back into the bot. We need to be a lot more cautious if we're creating digital products for vulnerable people. And we bear that out. So when we work with community legal centres or community organisations, we do more extensive testing and more varied testing with those sorts of people who they think might end up using the bot. The kinds of things we want to look for are any markers of vulnerability or any markers of inability to access or use technology. And that can be from, do they literally have access to the internet? But also down to more ambiguous markers like, are they able to use the internet? What are their attitudes towards the internet? Do they have disabilities? Can they speak English as a first language, etc.? And by pulling together those factors, you can attempt to build out a bot that is as accessible as possible. There are a number of guidelines out there for people who are concerned about that, and everyone should be concerned about accessibility. So the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines are an awesome set of guides around how to build digital products that are more accessible for people. For example, if they are vision impaired, as one example. So there's lots of information out there. I think the key thing though, for me, is these kinds of products, and this sort of goes back to our original point, these kinds of products are never going to be for everybody. There are always going to be people who don't like using these sorts of digital products or who can't. And so we need to make sure that they're not replacing other services, but rather they are supplementing them for the people who can use them. Now, that's not to say we should rest on our laurels and not bother about accessibility at all, but we're never going to get to a point where 100% of people want to speak to a bot for every issue. It's just not going to happen. And so we should let go of that idea immediately, I think. I mean, other than Josef, of course. I think there's been so many, and it can be very easy in this sector to focus on the fact that, you know, not enough is happening. But when you start speaking to people in the sector, there is a lot happening, and it's really, really promising. And yes, I would agree with the proposition that more could be done, because we have the technology, we have the expertise, and we have a problem that we need to address, which is a massive access to justice gap, which I see as a real failure of society and the government and the profession. But to call out a few examples, Annika is one, Annika Legal. They have set up a system which connects students who want more legal work or legal experience with people who need legal help. And so they've started in the area of tenants' rights. I think they've started with repairs, one really particular example. And they've seen really amazing results, more efficient and seamless for both the client and for the student and for the lawyer who's overseeing that. I think actually, to call out Joseph, not being facetious, a number of the community legal centres that we work with have done amazing work on the platform.
Great. Can you give us an example?
Yeah, sure. So a community legal centre in Queensland, so Central Queensland Community Legal Centre, has built an intake bot to automate the process of onboarding clients. That has saved that organisation a lot of time in doing something that probably wasn't providing value to the organisation, wasn't providing value to the client, certainly. And now, as we discussed earlier, they have more time to spend on the things that matter, including helping those people once they've been onboarded efficiently and quickly and seamlessly.